What you know about the Korean War may not be the full story. These are the most consequential moments for America. The Unauthorized History of the Korean War, streaming now on Fox Nation.
I'm 37 years old. I was born in 1985. I'm the first millennial candidate ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican.
He's a total family man. He deeply loves this country.
He's run a successful business, created it from scratch.
Vivek is a born leader.
Very eloquent in his denunciation of some of the great currents that are flowing through our culture today.
He's somebody who stands for what he believes, even if it's not popular.
Brilliant, driven, and entrepreneurial.
He's the smartest person I've ever met. He has a very unique way of telling a story, getting people behind that.
Vivek has always been in a hurry. He's not willing to wait for someone else to tell him it's his turn.
That's why today I'm announcing my run for President of the United States.
Vivek Ramaswamy is an entrepreneur, innovator, and anti-woke advocate. But now the 37-year-old Republican is on a new mission, this time to save America by running for president in 2024. So, who is Vivek Ramaswamy? Vivek Ramaswamy was born August 9th, 1985, in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Vivek is a first-generation American. His parents were legal immigrants and came to the United States.
His father, also named Vivek, and his mother, Geetha, moved from South India to the Midwest for a better life.
When I look at what my parents did when they came to this country 40 years ago, I look at people who did something that I actually could never do. Imagine you packing up your bags, going halfway across the world. To be able to do that with a conviction to say that I think I'm going to create something greater by making that sacrifice for the next generation, that's something pretty special.
Like a lot of people who come from abroad, his parents were focused and energetic and desired everything for their children to be better.
I went to public school through 8th grade. Some kids who came from some pretty rough background. I was a nerdy kid, thick glasses, carrying books from one science class to math class, and was really studious. That wasn't too popular. I was late from one class to another, and I got pushed down a flight of stairs. It was pretty traumatic, and I ended up having to get a hip surgery. Now, something good came out of it too, is that my parents decided in the back of that, all right, we can't keep you in this school for high school.
Vivek then attended the private Jesuit prep school, St. Xavier High School in Cincinnati.
I was one of the few non-Catholic kids in the high school. I read the Bible for the first time in 9th grade. It was like a foreign text to me. It was interesting. It was new. It was uncomfortable.
Vivek blossomed at St. Xavier. He was a nationally ranked tennis player and graduated as class valedictorian in 2003.
If we look back at the travels over the past 4 years, we will realize that tonight is not the destination of those travels, but is instead only another stop on that journey. So tonight, let that journey begin. Actually, excuse me. It's already begun.
Vivek spent his undergraduate at Harvard studying biology.
I first met Vivek in college at Harvard. We were both freshmen and we lived in the same dorm together. We were both interested to some extent in politics, and we sort of, would see speakers who were presenting at Harvard and kind of share our thoughts on it.
Ramaswamy was also chair of Harvard's political union, the University Debate Society.
Vivek held a lot of views that were not the popular views at the time among the student body, and he was unafraid. Vivek is somebody who expresses his thoughts regardless of the social consequences. He hasn't changed one bit.
In his spare time, Vivek moonlighted as a rapper and went by the stage name Davek. He graduated from Harvard in 2007, summa cum laude, and moved to New York City to work as an analyst at QVT Financial.
He was working at a hedge fund that made investments in biotech companies. He was managing that portfolio. And as part of that, he was involved in predicting whether or not individual clinical trials would be successful or not, and whether or not those drugs would go on to be approved medicines. And he had success in picking some of these things, including the drug that would go on to become the first cure for hepatitis C virus.
That success led to Vivek quickly moving his way up through the company, making partner at the age of 28. At the same time, Vivek was attending Yale Law School for the, quote, intellectual experience. While there, he met his wife, Apurva, who was enrolled in medical school. In 2014, Vivek quit finance to pursue his own venture.
And he mentioned that he was considering leaving his job and starting his own business. And he mentioned at the time that, it was a substantial amount of money he was potentially leaving on the table. And I said, Vivek, you shouldn't be someone else's employee. You should be your own boss. And if you have confidence in the idea, you should take the risk. It's worth it. And that's what he did.
A few months later, Ramaswamy founded the biopharmaceutical startup, Roivant Sciences.
He encouraged me to see whether or not I was interested in working at Roivant. And so I came in, met all the team, and decided to give it a try to sort of work with him on developing medicines.
And Vivek had big plans to overhaul Big Pharma.
There aren't a lot of companies that are in the biotech space that are founded by people in their 20s. It's pretty unusual. But Vivek had built such a strong reputation within the industry as an investor that he was able to really bring on board very talented, very experienced people who'd already developed medicines successfully. As an investor, you only have the ability to decide whether you invest or don't invest in a company. You can't really step in and run it. And he sort of saw all these different efficiencies in the way that markets worked, and he thought he could do a better job of it than some of the companies that he was investing in.
People said, you're not going to be able to do this as an outsider coming in. You know what? Pharma's run like a managerial bureaucracy in a government. I came in to break that system.
But Roivant didn't immediately find success.
The first drug that we developed was an abysmal failure. It was a drug to treat patients with Alzheimer's disease. The entire pharma industry had tried for decades to develop a drug for Alzheimer's. And so at the ripe age of 28, I decided that I wanted to take my crack at proving everybody wrong and develop a drug that I thought looked promising.
In 2015, Ramaswamy created the IPO Axovant Sciences, a subsidiary of Roivant, to front the Alzheimer's drug, raising more than $315 million in capital.
Well, what the heck are we supposed to make of this breathtaking Axovant Sciences today, with the stock changed under the symbol AXON, rocketing 99.3% higher on its first day of trading in a deal that some are calling the biggest biotech IPO ever?
In May of 2015, with the stock of Axovant rising, Vivek married his wife Apurva. But instead of honeymooning in Europe as planned, the two celebrated with ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange.
It ended up becoming one of the highest profile drugs in all of pharma. I ended up leading what ended up being the largest biotech IPO at the time in 2015 on the basis of that single drug.
Then, at just 30 years old, Vivek landed on the cover of Forbes magazine, dubbed the boy in the bubble.
The entire scientific community was debating it. In fact, they were waiting on the edge of their seats to see whether that drug was going to work. And for my part, I thought I was actually, by the age of 30, within striking distance of changing the course of medical history for the better for these millions of patients who suffered from this terrible disease. So in 2017, we finished the trial, we turned over the cards, and it turned out to be a failure. The drug didn't work. And personally, it was devastating for me.
That experience changed the trajectory of his life.
I'd left a comfortable career as a biotech investor behind to start this company. And then here I was, failing on this scale, more gargantuan than I could have ever imagined. I went from being a daring young rebel to being the guy who took a big risk and failed. I was panned in the biotech press. My peers and my competitors relished it. But eventually that experience strengthened me. It even gave me a sense of freedom. It taught me that if I was free to fail on a scale that big and still survive it, then I was free to fail on an even bigger scale the next time around and still be fine in the end. And that realization encouraged me to keep taking big risks. And eventually we did get drugs approved. Eventually we did get drugs to patients. The one I'm most proud of is a new FDA-approved drug for prostate cancer. And that little startup I founded in 2014 ended up becoming a multi-billion-dollar company.
A lot of people have good ideas, It takes more than good ideas to build a company. You really need to work hard. You need to see around corners. He's somebody who has the ability to really think through all the different steps involved and make sure that he's doing it at the highest level possible. And he expects a lot of people underneath him. He's somebody who is a boss who expects an enormous amount from his employees, but it's nothing he wouldn't do himself. And he is the hardest working person at any organization he runs. I think people were a little bit surprised, who's this young guy coming out of nowhere with an idea for a company? But he proved his skeptics wrong. I mean, he was able to deliver exactly what he promised to do.
Then in 2021, Vivek found himself at a crossroads again.
I founded the company, led it as CEO for 7 years. I wasn't even paying attention to these issues. The first time it landed on my doorstep was Trump's order on immigration, executive order on immigration.
This is the protection of the nation from foreign terrorist entry into the United States.
President Donald Trump signing an executive order Friday to put new vetting measures in effect to tighten U.S. visa and refugee policies with special focus on several Muslim-majority countries.
There was an industry-wide statement where they handed it around and said, can't you just sign it? About 200 biotech CEOs that had signed it landed on my desk. But I said, I don't know the first thing about this, so I'm not going to sign it. And I get called out on social media by some guy who says that I didn't have, his words, the cojones to sign that statement, especially because I was the kid of immigrants.
Another night of violent protests sparking mayhem across the country following the death of George Floyd while in police custody.
Then employees of my company stand up and say, okay, George Floyd died, and we need to issue a statement in support of Black Lives Matter as an organization that calls for the decimation of the nuclear family structure. I refuse to do it. I cannot be a leader in good conscience who says something that I do not believe. And later on, the following January, I wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal in my personal capacity. I'm not speaking as a biotech CEO, speaking about the censorship culture in our country that then causes 3 advisors to my company to resign, very prominent people in U.S. healthcare. And that was my wake-up call to say that, okay, I got a choice. Either I can mostly say what I want to say, mostly, but do it through the filter of corporate self-interest. Or I can really speak my mind as a citizen.
Eventually, he realized that he couldn't do that as the CEO of Roivant. He needed to step down to ensure that the company could be independent of his political views, and it seemed like the right time. So he left Roivant and pursued this next chapter of his life.
Today, Roivant is worth more than $6 billion and has secured FDA approval for 5 different medications, including the promising prostate cancer drug, Orgovyx.
I view what I'm doing now as the beginning of my version of public service, which is to be able to speak out freely, to start talking openly again.
In August of 2021, Vivek took his experience and put it on paper.
He went to Harvard and Yale, but don't let that fool you. He's actually smart. Author of the book Woke Inc., Vivek Ramaswamy.
I've seen this from every angle in corporate America. Companies pretend like they care about something other than the pursuit of profit and power, precisely to gain more profit and power. And it's not just a scam that robs consumers now, Bill. It is actually a threat to American democracy itself.
The message of Woke Inc. resonated with America, and he became a leading voice of the conservative movement.
We need to turn that social hierarchy upside down, or at least even it out, by using any means necessary, not just through government, but even through the private sector, even through our schools, and even through our economy itself, including the use of quota systems based on race, gender, and sexual orientation to correct for those alleged societal injustices. That is what it means to be woke.
It's a book in which he's taken on the elites, their view of what life ought to be like, on Americans, on the vast majority of Americans who don't accept the basic premise that our country is systemically racist and that we have so much to apologize for.
Then Vivek took it a step further. Dubbed the CEO of Anti-Woke by The New Yorker, Vivek was out to fight the ESG movement. Those are the environmental, social, and governance issues that companies use as a set of standards to make woke investments.
If you're a hardworking American, chances are you have an investment account of some kind. And chances are that investment account has funds invested in asset managers like BlackRock or State Street or Vanguard or Invesco, who use your money to tell companies to adopt so-called ESG values. telling companies like Chevron to cut oil production and focus on emissions caps, companies like Apple to adopt racial equity audits to inform their hiring standards. I wanted to create a new option, and so that's why I created Strive, STRV, investing in 500 of the largest U.S. public companies. And the message to corporate America is to focus on excellence over politics.
Strive Asset Management just launched a new financial transparency campaign. They want to educate everyday investors, like myself and you viewers, on exactly where their money is going.
After 6 months as the head of Strive, Vivek decided it was time for a new challenge.
That's why today I'm announcing my run for President of the United States. This isn't just a political campaign. This is a cultural movement to create a new dream for the next generation of Americans.
We all knew or suspected that at some point that he would want to probably run for president.
We used to have that sense of what it means to be American. When we lose that, when we lose family, when we lose faith in God, when we lose conviction in our country, that leaves a black hole in its wake. What happens to a black hole? It sucks things in. Something else is going to fill that void instead.
Vivek does not write a speech. He just has it all in his mind, and I think what it really allows him to do is lead effectively and lead quickly with the message that people need to hear.
Okay, I think at the top of a list of our agenda of bureaucratic reform in this country needs to be to say that we're going to take those civil service protections, those don't exist in the private sector for a reason, take those civil service protections and throw them out the window and replace them with an 8-year sunset clause. Because you know what, I'm running for president of the United States, and if I can't collect a paycheck from the federal government for more than 8 years, I don't think most of the federal bureaucrats working for me should be either. Let's get some fresh blood in there. It's pretty simple stuff, you know. And I think a lot of these government agencies now have gone so far off the reservation that we actually just need, there's only one way to do it. We're not going to reform it by putting some figurehead who sits on top. The only way to do it is actually to shut them down, and that begins from the Department of Education to the FBI. We will shut down the agencies that cannot be reformed from within.
I think what he saw in corporate America alarmed him, and what he knew from his own life experience was that the kind of beliefs that were being spread through these woke approaches to culture and politics and American life would undermine the things that made it possible for him as the son of immigrants to succeed. And I think that's a big motivation for him. He fears what's happening here will fundamentally change America in a way that will mean that there will be fewer people who are able to rise like he did.
We're running for the win to take this all the way. And you know, I'll tell you this, I'm the only millennial ever to run for US president as a Republican. I'm doing this for the next generation, and I'm in this race because I think we can take Trump's agenda even further than Donald Trump ever did. I tell those audiences, America First does not belong to Trump, doesn't belong to me, it belongs to the people of this country.
He's a dark horse and, an outsider, and he's going to need to make some moves here. And he's also got to count on some of the people above him in the pecking order to make mistakes that cause people to say, well, you know what, I was sort of looking at him or her, but I'm going to look elsewhere. And that guy Vivek has hung in there long enough and seems to be a good alternative.
Since announcing his presidential bid, Vivek's campaign has gained traction and opposition from the liberal media.
One of the lessons that we learned
aren't allowed to enjoy the freedoms.
I disagree with you on that, Don. I disagree with you. I think you're doing a disservice to our country by failing to recognize the fact that we have equality before the law.
When you are in black skin and you live in this country, then you can disagree with me, but we're not. You mentioned that we have three different shades of melanin.
Don, I think we have to be able to talk about these issues in the open regardless of the color of our skin.
And taking on what could be one of the biggest issues this campaign season.
Are you confident that you know that gender is as binary as you're describing it? Are you confident that it isn't a spectrum?
I am.
You know this as a scientist?
Well, there's two X chromosomes if you're a woman, an X and a Y. That means you're a man.
There's a lot of scientific research out there. There's a lot of scientific research out there that says gender is a spectrum.
Chuck, I respectfully disagree. Gender dysphoria for most of our history, all the way through the DSM-5, has been characterized as a mental health disorder, and I don't think it's compassionate to affirm that.
When he's on the debate stage, when he's public speaking, he shines. And I think that's going to become more and more clear, and especially more clear when he's in the same room as some of his candidates. And it's very hard to actually win the nomination to become president, but one thing I feel very confident in is he is going to be the rising star in this race.
There's nothing more racist than to say that the color of your skin predicts something about the content of your character and your ideas. And so I reject.
But will he gain enough momentum to win the nomination?
A lot of Republicans agree with what he has to say about the presence of woke philosophy in our schools, in our business enterprises. But being president is more than that. And what he's going to need to do over the next 7 or 8 or 9 months is demonstrate that he's got a broader range of issues that he is capable of talking about and has a vision on that cause Republicans to say, I'm signing up with Vivek.
I think it's tough to overcome such large support for the top 2 candidates that exist today. I think that's the biggest challenge.
Bluntly, I respected Donald Trump for what he did coming in as an outsider in 2015. You only get to be an outsider once, though. I'm coming in as a new outsider. As far as I know, I'm the only real outsider in this race.
His biggest challenge will be get known, followed closely by developing a message that allows a virtual unknown to galvanize millions of people to vote for him. And particularly in the first 4 contests, hundreds of thousands of very skeptical voters in Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina. And he's going to have to get known to those people and convince them to take a very heavy bet on a very outside chance, which is what he is.
Vivek is betting his own money he can take it all the way, putting an 8-figure investment in his own campaign.
I wasn't born rich, but I've built companies and had success, and I'm investing heavily in the campaign. But that's not even going to be what lifts this up. What lifts this up is actually a grassroots uprising of small dollar donors that want to take this America First agenda to the next level.
He's doing this because he thinks it's the right thing to do, and because he has the luxury with his wealth to decide what matters and what doesn't matter. And this is how he wants to choose to spend his time. And I think, whether he's successful or not, I hope he changes the conversation in this country for the better.
He's got to raise more money, and that's generally a sign of, particularly in this day and age, of generating more support if you're getting more small dollar donors to cross that threshold by pushing the donate button on their computer.
E pluribus unum, from many, one. You see, that is the dream that won the American Revolution. That is the dream that reunited us after that Civil War. That is the dream that won us 2 world wars and the Cold War. That is the dream that still gives hope to the free world. And if we can revive that dream over this fractious group identity nonsense, then nobody in the world, not a nation, not a corporation, not a virus is going to defeat us. That is what American exceptionalism is all about, and that is what we will revive to save this great nation. Thank you. God bless you. God bless your families. God bless the United States of America. Thank you.